History is written in the light, but its deepest truths are often preserved in the shadows. Some stories were forgotten, some were erased, and some were never meant to be found. Welcome to the Tamas Archive. In the frozen forests of Maine, in the winter of 1838, rival groups of armed men stood in the dark, muskets raised, waiting for the slightest movement in the trees. Within months, the United States and the British Empire would raise armies and approve millions in war funding to defend this single disputed border. But when the tension finally broke, the only blood spilled belonged to a wild animal that had no idea it was part of a war. This is a record of how a dispute over timber and unmapped lines on a page brought two world powers to the brink of a conflict that neither side actually intended to fight. This is the Aroostook War. The roots of the crisis reach back to 1783. The Treaty of Paris ended the American Revolution, but it left a critical flaw in the new geography of North America. Diplomats agreed that a natural highlands boundary would separate the United States from British Canada, but the territory was vast, frozen, and largely unmapped. No one had actually surveyed the land to see where those highlands were. For 50 years, the border remained a theoretical line of ink on a parchment map. As long as the land was empty, the ambiguity didn't matter. But by the 1830s, the ignored border had become a geographical vacuum waiting for a catalyst to ignite it. That catalyst was timber. The unmapped forests were filled with towering white pines, the most valuable resource in the region. The British Royal Navy prized these trees for shipmasts, while American settlers needed them to fuel a booming lumber trade. Both nations began claiming the same trees on the same unmapped land.
Hostilities turned personal when Maine sent a census taker into the disputed area. New Brunswick officials, believing he was trespassing on British soil, arrested him on the spot. Maine's government viewed the arrest as an invasion. In response, Maine's militia seized a group of New Brunswick lumbermen. When a New Brunswick military commander marched in to expel the militia, he was captured as well. Not a single shot had been fired, yet both sides were now taking prisoners. A bureaucratic disagreement was rapidly shifting into a military confrontation. The tension reached a breaking point on a December night in 1838 near Caribou. American and Canadian lumberjacks faced each other in the woods, muskets drawn, waiting for a reason to fire. Suddenly, a wild black bear charged out of the brush toward the Canadian team. In the panic, they fired and shot it dead. The Americans heard the gunfire, but couldn't see what had happened in the darkness. They assumed the Canadians had opened fire on them and began shooting back into the trees. The lumberjacks eventually fled, but the news of the battle quickly reached the capitals. A wild animal had just become the trigger for an international mobilization. Reports of the skirmish caused reason to give way to national pride. Governments that had ignored the border for 50 years now prepared to fight for every inch of it. This chart shows the sudden financial weight behind the escalation. Maine's legislature approved $800,000 for defense, while Nova Scotia pledged $100,000 to support New Brunswick. But the federal reaction was even larger. The United States Congress authorized 50,000 troops and $10 million in war funding to defend the Maine woods. Within days, 60,000 men were mobilized. Two world powers stood on the edge of a major war over a misunderstanding in the dark. To stop the descent into combat, President Martin Van Buren dispatched General Winfield Scott to the region. Scott worked to cool the local militias and buy time for a diplomatic solution. He managed to keep the standoff bloodless long enough for the politicians to take over. In 1842, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty was signed. It finally mapped the boundary that had been left vague since the Revolution, ending the dispute with a handshake rather than a battle. The treaty erased months of panic and fear. A conflict that had nearly drawn tens of thousands of men into a war was settled with a quiet agreement. The Aroostook War is often left out of history books. It lacked the ideological clarity of the Revolution, or the sheer scale of later conflicts, existing instead as a series of captures and confusion. The Maine woods are completely silent today. There are no monuments here to fallen soldiers, or to grand battles. In a mobilization that cost millions and brought two empires to the brink, The only true casualty was that one bear near Caribou. History is preserved in these forgotten shadows. Every civilization leaves behind its secrets. This is the Tamas Archive. Hidden histories, forgotten truths.